Everyone, welcome to the City Council meeting of November 4th. And I would ask everyone to please rise while we do the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, welcome everyone. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business for the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor of or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and items listed under third reading. On the second and last meeting of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item?
We ask those giving testimony to please clearly state your name, spell your name, give your address, and sign in on the sign-in sheet lying on the podium. Testifiers may use either microphone, and there is a sign-in sheet by each microphone. We ask those individuals from city staff who are testifying to please state your name, title, and the department you work for. Our first item of business is actually an announcement. Due to the Veterans Day holiday, the City Council will not meet on Monday, November 11th. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Is there anyone that would like to speak on any of these items? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. Lynn Johnson, Director of Lincoln Parks and Recreation. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Thad Furian. Thad is an applicant for the Veterans Memorial Garden Advisory Council. Thad is the Director of Aviation and Safety at the Nebraska National Guard, and we are pleased to have his interest in serving on the Veterans Memorial Garden Advisory Council.
Well, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to serve on this wonderful committee. Tell us a little bit about your green thumb. It's a Veterans Memorial Garden.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, first off, for listening. I have an interest in serving in the Veterans Memorial Garden Advisory Committee. As you know, active duty service members, we receive a significant amount of public gratitude for what we do. And in my view, being able to serve as part of the Veterans Memorial Garden Committee is a way to really reflect that gratitude back to the men and women who are memorialized there and have earned the majority of that gratitude. This is a small way for us to give back.
That's wonderful. Are there any questions? Well, thank you very much for your service, your continued service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on any of these items? Okay.
All right, if not, we can vote on these items. Item 1A was introduced by Bowers.
So moved. Second.
Introduced by Bowers, seconded by Christensen. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then items 1B and 2A through C were introduced by Christensen.
So moved. Second. I'd like to move the request of the applicant, item 2C, be moved into the 18th of November.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, seconded by Schob. Teresa, do you want to do a vote on just that change?
Yes.
Okay.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then on the remaining items, final vote. Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward and raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 4A and B together. They are the application of Shamaz Petroleum LLC, doing business as NP Mart 5, for a Class D liquor license at 2801 O Street, and the related manager application. Would you gentlemen raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just state your names and addresses.
My name is Mike Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue in Omaha.
Arshad Nazir, 16962 Polk Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68135.
Well, thank you for coming down. Tell us a little bit about your liquor license application.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is a liquor license for a convenience store on 28th and O Street. There's one there now. This would be a new license, new manager, new owner. Same type of operation as planned. And if you have any questions, we're here for questions, and he is here if you have any.
Are there any questions?
I-
Yes.
You said you live in Omaha, and you'll be the manager here in Lincoln?
Yes,
Manager on file, do you,
I actually have a gas station. I had a gas station in Lincoln. I lived in Lincoln before. It's on 23rd and R Street, but never had a license there because that establishment was without liquor license. But I own I own gas station in Wahoo. You know what I mean. But I will be appointing a manager here when I take over. You know what I mean. There will be a permanent person that that will be responsible for everything.
Yeah, he's got multiple locations, so.
the last phrase about the local manager was, thank you,
Yes.
that's what I was.
Yes, and then
He's
pretty
scheduled
much
to take
maybe
your
hire-
training November 14th.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you both very much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Okay, next item, please.
All right, next is item 4C, the manager application of Tyler Brady for the Blaze Pizza at 1317 Q Street.
Is Mr. Brady here? Oh, they're right there. Come on up.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
I swear.
Thank you. Just state your name and address, Tyler.
Tyler Brady, 1255 South 25th Street.
And tell us a little bit about your application and your career.
So I'm turning in the application for management position at Blaze Pizza. And they already had a liquor license under someone else's name, but I'm going to take over that. And they just sell beer.
And have you already taken the class?
I'm taking that on the 14th of November.
Okay, terrific. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming down.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item?
Madam Chair, I move approval of items 4A, B, and C.
Second.
Moved by Christensen, seconded by Washington. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next is our public hearing resolutions. Item 5A, assessing public health nuisance abatement costs associated with the clearing of public nuisances by the Health Department on the following benefited properties: 3701 Prescott Avenue, 3069 T Street, 101 M Street, 2215 North 31st Street, 3316 North 48th Street, 4543 St. Paul Avenue, 2021 Garfield Street, 825 C Street, 1812 Harwood Street, 3520 S Street, and 1136 Peach Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. Members of the council, my name is Scott Holmes. I manage the Environmental Health Division with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department. Annually, the Health Department is required to bring to the council a list of properties for which abatements have been conducted. These typically are on garbage problems or major accumulations of garbage that were not corrected after due notification under the code. We received several hundred complaints of garbage problems on properties in Lincoln, and very few end up having to go to the abatement route. These are the ones that did, and we bring those to the council for their action. This includes a cost, of course, for the contractor that we pay for to clean up the property as well as some administrative costs in the abatement process. Be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I have a quick question. Do these costs become a fine, or they become an assessment on the property?
They are assessed against the property.
But it's not a fine?
It is not a fine.
Okay.
Yep.
If we don't collect them, they become a lien on the property?
Correct.
Okay.
Scott, can you talk, you mentioned that we received many more complaints. How does the health department handle it? Do they issue a warning or?
So the process typically is that upon receiving the complaint, we send out a letter to the property owner, and if it's a rental, to the tenant also, informing them that we received the complaint, asking them to take action. They have a card in there that they can respond to us and inform us if they have taken action. We typically follow up about a week later and do a site inspection to see if the problem has been corrected. If it's not, we follow that up with a certified letter to the property owner and tell them that they are responsible for their property to clean it up. That usually results in action to eliminate the situation.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Are there any more questions?
I got a statement. I went on a ride-along for some of these trash pickups a couple of years ago, and I really appreciate the workers with the health department who got their professionalism and the care that they have for the properties as they go and clean this up. So I really appreciate
Thank you.
The health department's role and the workers that do that and the professionalism they provide for it.
There was one property, which is 3701 Prescott Avenue. That's commonly been called for many years Azalea Land. The city has been working on that property for many years. We did an abatement there that involved hazardous materials, the cost of which we just got a call today, and I talked to Mr. Utsumi, and he has asked us to reconsider those costs because of a particular question he has on them. We'll be working with the law department on that particular one, so I believe there's going to be an amendment to the action today.
I'm prepared to make that amendment when we get there.
Great.
Thank you very
Any
much.
other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Seeing
Okay.
none, well, thank you, Scott, very
Thank
much.
you. Yeah.
Okay, Teresa, we can vote on this item,
I would
correct?
like to make an amendment.
Okay.
Before we vote on this item, I'd like to remove this item, 3701 Prescott Avenue, from the list of addresses to be addressed.
Second.
Okay, proposed by Washington, seconded by Christensen. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers? Motion carried 7-0. And this was introduced by Bowers.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bowers, seconded by Christensen. Any further discussion?
Just for a point of order, we
Yes.
did that out of order. He needed to move
right.
it first. And
Then I,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I realized that I made a boo-boo too. I should have asked, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? So I apologize. Just wanted to give you one opportunity. Is there anyone else that wanted to talk on this item? Okay.
All right, I'll call for the final vote. Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then, our public hearing ordinance's second reading. Item 6A is change of zone 2463F as in Frank, application of the Three Amigos Properties LLC for a change from O2 Suburban Office to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District and amending the planned unit development to include an adjacent property to the east on property generally located at 4747 Old Cheney Road.
Hi, I'm Marcia Kinning, and I'm with Riga Engineering, and I'm representing Three Amigos. This property is just having the change of zone be just like the people to the west, that property. And it will allow then enough parking and the signage to accommodate the existing building that's there now. So.
Okay, are there any questions? Seems pretty straightforward.
Kind of is.
Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item?
Hello, I'm Rick Kruger, and managing of the Three Amigos LLC, and I'm here just to answer any questions you might have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kruger? I don't
Thank you.
see any, but thank you both for coming down. We do appreciate that. And again, is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Okay.
All right. If not, I'll call items 6B and C. They are change of zone 19022, application of Dane and Angela Todd for a change from R2 residential to R2 residential with landmark designation on property generally located at 3460 East Pershing Road, and a related special permit to allow for the construction of a detached garage with waivers to height, lot, area, and other zoning restrictions.
Hi, I'm Dane Todd. I live at 3460 East Pershing Road. Just here to answer questions.
Well, tell us a little bit about your application. And I know your house. I walk by it all the time with our dogs, so.
So I'm sure my dog barks at yours. So we live in an old home in the Woodshire neighborhood with a detached garage. The house was built in the mid-1920s, and the layout of the lots in the neighborhood are very narrow, as all homes were in that area, and the garage is set in the back part of the property. The garage is listed as a two-stall garage, but that's for older type vehicles than currently. What we would like to do is widen the garage, actually go up a floor to create a gym multi-use space with a deck off the back of it so that we can utilize the view of the country club, which is right behind us. Behind the garage is essentially useless space. Thank goodness we have large trees in the neighborhood, and so unfortunately though, that means my backyard remains more or less mud in that area at all times. We can't see the kids when they play back there in that area, and so we would like to just be able to utilize that space. The reason we're doing it in this fashion is because setbacks and things with new codes would make it so that any attempts to change the garage would likely result in us having to move it into the basically middle of the backyard, which obviously we're not doing. We've discussed it with our neighbors directly to our north, who happen to also be the president of our homeowners association, and they're on board and actually were nice enough to testify for us at the initial hearing, as well as we've discussed it with the other neighborhoods or neighbors in the area, and nobody's raised any objections to it.
Great. Welcome, Mr. Zimmer.
Ed Zimmer, Planning Department. Thought you might want to see a picture.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Lovely high-style Tudor, as we might expect to find in Woodshire. Interesting history of the Beeler family that had connections to early aviation history, which Lincoln has a rich heritage. This area, coincidentally, also was where Charles Lindbergh first flew before Woodshire, but only slightly before Woodshire, so there's a neat synchrony there. But we think it qualifies, Preservation Commission thinks it qualifies, Planning Commission thinks it qualifies for the landmark designation. We've also worked closely with the Todds on what I think is a lovely garage plan that they've brought forward under the special permit, so I think it's fully appropriate to the district, and that's also recommended to you. So the pictures to go with Mr. Todd's explanation.
Richard.
Are you going to have to do any shatterproof windows on this?
We very rarely get golf balls in the
Okay.
backyard. You got to be pretty far off course at that point. Our next couple of neighbors north. Yeah, the next couple of neighbors north, though,
they get a lot.
They get a lot.
Yeah, we get a lot. We're on 20th.
Oh, yeah.
Madam?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Todd, you have a wonderful advocate next to you, Mr.
Here,
Zimmer.
here.
Yes. If Mr. Zimmer and the Historic Preservation Advisory Group give this a blessing, it's easy for me to give this a blessing and approve of all those variances that you need in order to build that.
Thank you.
Terrific. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
I'm
Yes?
a little confused. It is currently on the historic registry, or you would propose it to be on the
The neighborhood as a whole is on the National Register of Historic Places. The special permit they're applying for requires individual landmark designation. And that's what the first part of change of zone, which is simply an overlay to the existing R2 zoning. And they accept some additional responsibilities in making this request in order to build the garage they want to build. So it's on the National Register, but it needs that individual designation to be eligible for the zoning category they're asking for.
Thank you, that helps. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? All right, let's go on to the next.
Come forward, come forward.
Oh, sure, please.
Yep,
Ah,
to the
we wanna-
microphone.
We all want to be able to hear you.
Janice Long, 5769 Northwest 12th Street, Lincoln. No?
No, hi Janice.
No. Anyway, I just want to say, I think that's a great idea. Is it okay to say something positive?
Of course.
Greatly appreciated, yes.
We've had so much negative in our life, in the media.
We go hug her.
We like positive, too.
Thank you.
And it looks like a very lovely garage, too. Multi-purpose garage.
And
so.
I'll have to drive by, so what was the address?
I think you can talk to Mr. Todd about that.
That was a good answer, thank you.
And what do I put, appearing on behalf of myself?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
I wasn't forced into this.
Good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Positive or negative? Okay, great. Let's go on to the next.
Next are items 6D and E. They're annexation 19008, annexing approximately 15.97 acres of property generally located at South 84th and Yankee Woods Drive, and the related change of zone, application of Cal Ruby LLC for a change from AG Agricultural to R3 Residential Planned Unit Development, and amending the Woodlands at Yankee Hill PUD to add an additional 47 dwelling units on property located at South 84th and Yankee Woods Drive.
My name is Stephanie Ponce. I'm here with Kruger Development at 8200 Cody Drive. And she said exactly what it is. We're just here to request the annex in of 15.97 acres into the city, changing the zoning from AG to R3. And I brought, does this show up?
Pictures.
Yeah, this will show the existing development and then this small PUD amended area that we're looking to annex in right now. And then this one shows more of the in-depth of what we're doing, of adding single-family lots, and then there's a few townhouse lots that we're adding.
Looks wonderful.
Oh, are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Seeing none, well, thank you very much for coming down. We appreciate that. Is there someone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item? Okay, let's go on to the next.
All right, next are items 6F through I. They are all related to property at the southwest corner of North 27th Street and Arbor Road. We have a comp plan amendment, application of Stonebridge Creek to amend the comp plan to revise the future land use map, the future growth areas map, and commercial center designations on approximately 150 acres, annexing approximately 150 acres, a conditional annexation and zoning agreement between the city and Stonebridge Creek for the annexation and development of the property, and a change of zone for a change from AG Agricultural, B2 Planned Neighborhood Business, R3 Residential, and I3 Employment Center to R3 Planned Unit Development, all at North 27th and Arbor Road.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Brad Marshall with Olson. I'm here on behalf of Stonebridge Creek LLC. So we have 4 items before you today. Comp plan amendment to change the area into a commercial center is the main change here. The change does increase the commercial center to the designated size that is included in the overall PUD. An annexation of approximately 150 acres. About 40 acres of this PUD is already annexed into the city of Lincoln. An annexation agreement that does include several of the development improvements that will be included and required to change mostly the arterial roadways in this area with Arbor and Alvo roads. And finally, the PUD. Some quick highlights: about 850,000 square feet of commercial center as proposed with this, 50 single-family homes, and about 1,100 multifamily units. The multifamily is designated in about 3 different areas across the about 190 total acres here. The single-family ranges from standard single-family to some adjacent parcels to Stonebridge Creek that is very consistent in the manner. There are some waivers to go along with those single-family lots they are adjacent to, and again, we believe that they are consistent with what is adjacent to those parcels. A couple of things to point out: there's some zoning changes or requests in this that includes what we called and coined with Planning Department a B2 plus. B2 plus is just basically a B2 with some conditional and approved uses within that area that include some H3 designated uses. The intent when we came forward was, well, there's H3 on the south side of the interstate, and we would have liked to have had those included. For instance, like a auto dealership. And so those were included in this overall proposal, included in that B2 plus area. If you look at the site plan, that's not included in B2 areas right now. If we were to do something designated other than what is shown as the town center, we would actually lose overall square footage. That square footage would decrease to about 700,000, and we would be able to replace some of that with some residential uses. That multifamily may be able to be increased then. It's a very large area. It accumulates a lot of drainage, and good thing this property does have a very large planned detention cell. It was actually part of a development master plan with the Stonebridge Creek and around the 2004 area. There are wetlands. There are saline wetlands that we have been in contact with the Corps of Engineers, Game and Parks, Fish and Wildlife, and so they have reviewed this application as well as we are developing in that particular area. There was a previous application and permit issued for this site in which we are complying with those in the PUD requirements. With that being said, one or two other things that I want to make sure we point out. There's several phasing. It's a large development, and instead of requiring us to come in and do all the improvements, we worked with the planning department to bring on different phases of the project if there were particular areas of interest. So if an apartment complex were to come in and not require a whole lot of infrastructure to get going, we have phased that into actually 4 different areas right now that we could begin development without major arterial roadway improvements. That being said, Arbor and Alva will be realigned. There is an intersection with a roundabout proposed and would be reimbursable by impact fees. There is probably 2 things to mention here. There is an adjacent parcel, an I3 designated zone within kind of surrounding, we've kind of engulfed it, I should say, with the PUD on the northwest and east sides of this parcel. We've been in contact with this property owner and working with him with some of the changes. Some of the text amendments that preceded this were allowed to decrease the I3 zone down to about 30 acres, and this PUD to kind of remain outside and work with that. A couple of things that I know that are concerns of this business and individual are particularly Humphrey Avenue and the access to the site. We've tried to be cognizant of traffic to this property. There was a requirement by planning and LTU to incorporate some traffic calming. We have worked with them over since the Planning Commission has ended and come up with a solution for some traffic calming, basically to slow down any traffic come down Humphrey. A lot of residents to the west traveling east to this commercial center made sense for traffic to try to be slowed down at some of these intersections. That intersection was selected by LTU to be Centurion and Humphrey. So we've presented a couple, particularly two options if there was any particular interest of adding some splitter islands to slow that traffic down in the area. I know another concern is parking on Humphrey. It is a public street. Parking would be allowed as far as I'm concerned, as far as I've been told by the city is that they're concerned. And not that we have any ability to say into the allowance of parking on a public street. What I can say is the site has been designated to allow adequate parking on these multifamily areas. So if for some reason in the future parking was prohibited beyond these streets, I believe that those apartment areas, those designations should be okay with the allowances that we've been providing for on property parking. So we do know that there's a lot of truck traffic in and out of this property. The last thing that I'll touch upon here is a setback requirement from industrial property to residential, because we do show apartment complexes across this property. And I'll just put this up to give you a little point of reference. The I3 area generally sits in this open area. The green area is designated as multifamily on the north side of Humphrey, and there's an apartment area here shown in this orange area as well. Generally, there are setback requirements from industrial to residential properties. There is a current use permit on this property. It does show designated setbacks on that property. There is a private agreement that was entered into in the early 2000s between the two individuals, the prior developer of this property and Cook Investments, and that does add into some additional setbacks because of the agreement, but it is not shown on our plan, is not shown on their use permit, and I think we've satisfied planning department such that we have shown adequate distance between the two properties. The private agreement exists, we're aware of it, they're aware of it, we have to comply with it, and I think that it's not really necessary to be shown on the plans. That may change. That's kind of the way that private agreements happen, so that we don't have to come back to the planning department if something were to change in the future. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time now.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
All right, I do. Thank you for coming down and
Absolutely.
testifying this afternoon. It looked, I'm looking at the private agreement. So how in force is that? Can you explain?
I'm not an attorney by any means, but my client, Stonebridge Creek LLC, has reviewed it, had their attorneys review it, and believe that they do have to comply with the agreement in all capacity of it. So we have incorporated that into our plans. Like I said, it is a private agreement. If either party were to want to change it in the future, I'd like to maintain that flexibility.
And then I did notice that Pam Dingman, the county engineer, had some comments about this. And I'm curious if we're going to hear from her. All right.
She's right here.
Call on her.
Okay. Do you have questions for Pam Dingman?
I do.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Marshall?
We're done with Mr. Marshall. Thanks so much.
Okay. Pam, could you come up for a few questions? Welcome to our county engineer.
And I guess I should still, even though you know who I am, I'll still self-identify. Pam Dingman, Lancaster County Engineer, 444 Cherry Creek Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68528.
Good afternoon. Hi, welcome. It seems unusual that the city and the county may not be in the same place on this annexation. So would you please explain why you're in opposition to the annexation as it is drawn?
Statute 18-1716.01 on annexation, property continuous to or abutting a county road. It states, any city or village annexing property continuous to or abutting upon any part of a county road shall be deemed to have annexed without further action all of the continuous or abutting road at the time of such annexation, except that this section shall not apply to county roads separating counties. And I'll just did it go up?
It will.
Give it a second.
Okay. I'm not exactly the most patient person, so I'll. So there is a copy of it. Again, like Mr. Marshall, I am a licensed civil engineer, not an attorney. My concern is that when this annexation was originally proposed to the county, the bridge actually, the annexation looked something like this, as shown in pink. So this line indicates what is the current boundary of the city of Lincoln, and then it was annexing in the road and showing in pink. My department commented that, hey, we already have one bridge that's 2/3 in the county and 1/3 in the city. The maintenance of that bridge is not working out very well because as the county, we are maintaining all of it. And so we would suggest that you take the entire bridge. Those locations where we have things that have happened like this would be Fletcher Avenue. And again, you can see in pink, this is 84th Street, Fletcher Avenue. This is the bridge that I fondly call the 2/3 bridge. However, Lancaster County maintains this bridge. The bridge does need substantial repairs at this time. I have not been able to negotiate. It creates a lot of difficult issues because if you go to the south side of the right-of-way, the embankment is actually in the city of Lincoln's jurisdiction, so I don't technically have the jurisdiction to repair the embankment. Another bridge is Havelock Avenue, where you can see the property line. There is a kind of an orphan piece of property that's been created here in order to annex around the bridge and leave the Havelock Avenue Bridge. This is adjacent to the event center in the county's jurisdiction. I simply ask that, hey, in this area, I have one bridge that's been annexed around. I have another bridge that we maintain, but it's really only 1/3 in my jurisdiction. And then there's this bridge. It would be nice if you could take this bridge. And so, as we look at how some of these annexation go, I guess I would just like to point out how annexations are typically done per the boundary. This is 98th Street at A, and you can see where the intersection has been annexed in, and the right-of-way lines, although they differ from the north to the south, have been projected parallel to the center line. And we're just asking that something similar be done here. It would be nice if we could work together on this, because again, if we're to project the lines as what's been done at 98th and A, it would end up that we'd have another one of these bridges that is 2/3 in Lincoln's jurisdiction, 2/3 in Lancaster County's jurisdiction. So it makes a lot of sense to do a whole bridge rather than a part of a bridge. I think what I'm really getting at here is that I just want to be fair. What's interesting is if our citizens drive over the bridge on Fletcher Avenue or the bridge on Arbor or the bridge on Havelock, they don't necessarily know whether they're in Lincoln or Lancaster County's jurisdiction. But what I know as county engineer is that we need to take care of this bridge. And so I just would humbly ask you to consider annexing this bridge. I will also add that my office, because we realize that this is an unfortunate disagreement between jurisdictions, we have prepared a legal description of this portion that would annex in the bridge. And so that's what I offer you today. It is an awkward situation, Councilwoman Washington, to be having this discussion, probably made more awkward in that the 2004 and really all the way up till probably 2013 work that was done on this property was done by me. So hopefully I won't have a lot of other opportunities like this as the county engineer because I worked really hard on this piece of property for it to be a benefit to the citizens of Lincoln and Lancaster County, actually for a decade or more. So,
Are there any questions for Ms. Dingman? Did we want staff to come up and talk about that?
Yes.
All right. Who would love to come up and talk about that on staff for the City of Lincoln?
Bring them all.
Even like who wants to be first?
Who wants
second?
Well, welcome. Now we have an attorney.
Yeah, I'll try not to be an engineer, so.
That's good. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Christensen would like your attention.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like
Please.
to ask, just to be clear, when we're talking about this bridge and annexation, is this referring specifically to item 6G? Or does it overlap into other items?
It would just be for the annexation, Councilman
Okay, so
Christensen.
6G is the only one in question here.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, so the question is simply about the boundaries of the annexation. It's not about should it be annexed or not, it's just simply where the drawn boundaries should be done. I'll have Tim address the question in regards to the state statutes. Just basically point out here, the area in blue at the top image, that is the area that was actually proposed first. I think the county engineer got an exhibit from Olson's, not from the city staff. This was the area that is actually required. This is the area that is actually adjacent to the area that is being annexed. The area that is being annexed is this area to the west. The area to the east is outside of the city limits. This is just north of the interstate on North 27th Street. Actually, the Nebraska Department of Roads right-of-way continues up North 27th Street a bit. And so we first wanted to make sure where did their right-of-way end and the county right-of-way begin. Because we annex the adjacent county right-of-way as required by state statutes all the time. That's a very typical thing we do. It doesn't require us to annex state highways or interstates, but we do annex the adjacent county right-of-way. So this was the right-of-way that was adjacent to the city limits. This the property that's being annexed is to the west. And we realized, though, that since Arbor to the west is annexed, but Arbor to the east is not, this would leave the intersection in the county's jurisdiction. And so that is why what is actually proposed and in front of you is the diagram on the south that includes the entire intersection in the city limits, but leaves out the bridge in the area that is the additional area being added to the annexation. So the top image is what is required by state statutes. The bottom is what is in front of you. And what the county engineer is asking for you is to continue actually all the way over and annex all of the bridge even though, and I'll have Tim address it, it is not necessarily required by state statutes.
With regard to the statute, it's simply a question of interpretation of what is contiguous and abutting. And I think it's safe to say, from our perspective, it's safe to say that the property lines for the annexed property is over here on the southwest part of the intersection. The Arbor Road up here is already part of the city, and 27th Street immediately adjacent to the property is clearly being annexed. The city has no question that that's the case. The city has agreed that it makes sense to annex the intersection since we're going to control all traffic going south of it and to the west of it. But I don't think there's any requirement in the state statute that the city annex east of the intersection at this point in time. All the private property that would be annexed is still within the county's jurisdiction and doesn't create an obligation on the part of the city to annex that bridge.
Sorry.
Listening to the county engineer, it seems like she was presenting that there's a pattern, or has been a pattern, of annexing up to but not quite everything for other bridges. So that it would seem that the intent there in those annexations was to keep the bridge under the maintenance of the county rather than the city. Would you care to comment on that at all?
Councilman Christensen, I wasn't part of those previous annexations. I'm not familiar with the specific facts associated with them. I saw with the property that was annexed as part of the Havelock one that it appears that there was a right angle drawn across with respect to the land that was immediately adjacent to the road, so I don't see any concerns with that one. But again, not familiar with all those conversations that led up to those annexations, so I probably shouldn't comment any further.
Steve Hendrickson of Planning Department, so I can comment. The one on Fletcher, where the bridge is divided, the adjacent right-of-way was annexed, and neither the city nor the county caught that part of the bridge was being annexed and not all of it. So that went forward with both neither the city nor the county objecting to it, and in hindsight, maybe we should have thought of a different way of doing it. But all the adjacent land was annexed. It happened to cut through the bridge. The one here on Havelock Avenue, I'm familiar with this one. The boundary that was given to us by the event center included this property, but did not include the little triangle. I don't know why the little triangle was not included with it, but it was not. So as typical, we went straight north from that property line, and that didn't include the bridge. So there wasn't any gerrymandering or anything going on. It was simply a matter of we annexed the land that was adjacent, that was part of the request being requested for annexation, and that didn't include any part of the bridge.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So do we know if the city were to annex the bridge, have we done cost analysis? Is that why we wouldn't want to do that? Obviously, maintenance.
That'd be a better question for Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, because I think they are aware of the bridge.
Okay. I'm just curious. I mean, we don't want any bridges, or what the resistance would be by and large, so.
But I would note, we have had other annexations, like on 40th Street between Rokeby and Yankee Hill Road, where we have annexed culverts, bridges, and things all the time. So when it's adjacent to the city, the area that's being annexed, and it's in county right-of-way, we annex it, even if it's included as a culvert or a bridge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if anybody here from LTU would want to address that. Thank you, Director Cassidy. Have enough bridges?
Tom Cassidy, I'm the interim director of Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. I don't know of any reason why we would have weighed in on this, but obviously if we own a bridge, the city of Lincoln owns a bridge, there is a certain cost that comes with that to maintain the bridge. And sometimes I would suspect that it's relatively small, but the county engineer and I have discussed bridges and bridge maintenance a little bit in her office recently, so I realize that sometimes bridge maintenance can be a big responsibility, and I can understand that, but I don't think we've done any kind of analysis on this particular bridge or have any idea what its needs might be right now.
I appreciate that. Okay.
Sandra.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
Director Cassidy, can you tell me, do you know where the roundabout will be when it is developed in this area, Arbor, Alvo, 27th? And, I'm sorry, I should have probably asked that of Brad.
Probably so. Well, I'll answer the best of my ability, and if I'm wrong, Brad can correct me, or Lonnie can correct me.
I'm just curious if it gets close to the bridge.
It's further to the west of the intersection, where Arbor Road is going to intersect the other street. Am I right on that, Steve?
You are correct.
I was in the meeting where we looked at this, and I was hoping that I was remembering the right development.
Yes. So here is North 27th. So here's the intersection and the bridge. None of the area to the north or to the east is being annexed. The new roundabout would be at the intersection of Arbor coming over and Alvo Road.
Okay.
Looks to me like that's probably a little less than a quarter of a mile.
Thank you very much.
Richard.
Quick question. The stuff on the east side of 27th Street that's being annexed, you said that was state right-of-way? That's why it's being annexed?
No, what I was saying is that we looked to see in this area, here is the interstate down in here, which portion of this was the state right-of-way could go all the way up to Arbor. We found that it didn't. So actually, we're annexing all of 27th Street, including in this case some of the state-owned right-of-way as well, just to try to avoid having little gaps. This is basically, it's a little hard to see. This is where like the off-ramps would be coming off of the interstate interchange is here. So the state, I think if I recall correctly, owns somewhere up to about this area. The county transitions, but rather than leave this portion out because it's not required, we also like to try to, for emergency services and everyone else, have boundaries that are easy to explain and easy to see on a diagram. So we are annexing all of 27th Street, and as we had talked about, we're including the intersection, but not the bridge to the east of the intersection.
But you're annexing, looks like a few hundred feet to the east of 27th Street as you go along between the off-ramp and up to Arbor Road. At least it looks that way on this proposed annexation.
Yeah, so this is an exhibit.
Right.
We're basically annexing all of the right-of-way. The
Okay.
right-of-way is quite wide. I think there must have been some work done in this area, so this area here is right-of-way that we're basically annexing.
Okay, but you didn't go straight north on that. You got jogged over. Okay.
And Steve, could you indicate on this map where the bridge is, this drawing?
The bridge is right here, because there's a jog between 27th Street, and then as 27th Street continues to the north, because you have a drainage way in this area.
But it seems like on Arbor Road, you've gone to the north side of Arbor Road. Is that correct?
So the area that is in red, this is the current area that's in the city limits. Quite a number of years ago, when this property was owned by a different developer, we were working to try to get Alvo relocated and redone as part of the future plan for this intersection. The roundabout will be somewhere about in here. And so at that time, in order to have the road built when it was in the city limits, rather than having the road built in the county jurisdiction, we did a long annexation of just simply that right-of-way and future right-of-way. This is the area in yellow is the rest of it, and as you can see along Arbor Road here, we're annexing, here's the land being annexed, and we're annexing all of the adjacent county right-of-way in that location.
Well, it does seem unusual that you've just omitted that little teeny section, which happens to be the bridge.
Right, just north of the state right-of-way.
And then carry that line, Drew, straight north.
David Carey with the Planning Department. Just provide some a little bit more clarification on the situation, just so you have the information at your disposal. As you go further to the east on
Arbor.
going further to the east, what is happening over here is that this area is not going to be developed for very for a very long time. It is not in our future service limit. It's not out to the year 2040 that it's going to be developed. So it is an area that doesn't have plans for development and annexation in the future. That is a factor in determining where do you draw the line here. If this was going to be continuing this kind of eastward march north of the interstate, I think we'd have a slightly different conversation. So that was a factor in coming into kind of figuring out where do you draw the line. And again, as was stated earlier by both Steve and Tim, and from the city's perspective, bringing in the full intersection itself isn't even required according to state statute. We are bringing in the intersection itself, and then drawing a line at some point. Determination was that the long-term future of that bridge is that it's going to remain in the county's jurisdiction.
And currently the county pays for just 2/3 of the maintenance or all of the entire maintenance?
No, for a bridge that's in the county jurisdiction, they're certainly paying for all of the maintenance on that. I think the reference earlier by the county engineer was that under a certain condition where there was a split in the bridge, that there was confusion as to who was paying for what. That's what I think was being referred to. We certainly want to avoid that moving forward.
Okay. Richard.
One more quick question for the applicant. Would the applicant have any problem with adding the annexation if we went north and added the bridge? Would that cause any changes?
For the development, it really does not change anything inside the boundary of it. I have had conversations with county engineer about changing the legal descriptions, and they would actually provide them for the city to include them.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on any one of these items?
Good afternoon. Tom Ackley, Coley Jessen Law Firm, 103 South 124th Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68124. Here on behalf of Cook Investments, which is the property that lies just to the east. That's been referenced a couple of times. If we could put up a picture here. So the Cook property, which was developed in 2005, currently is an industrial site. He has 15 employees, pays about $120,000 a year in taxes. So we're here to protect his interests, obviously, in the development going on around him. When this was initially platted, all of this was set to be industrial. And if you look at the planning department's comments and the current comprehensive plan information from the state, basically your comprehensive plan says that residential and industrial generally do not go next door to each other, which is obviously why we would object to the zoning change, because you're going to have apartments immediately adjacent to industrial. Appreciate the applicant indicating they're going to follow the 300-foot setback, but again, mixing residential with industrial, those are typically two uses that you do not see immediately next to each other. The other thing, if you look at the report from the planning department as well, the state has commented, again, the I-80 corridor was intended not to have residential or other development there other than industrial, which again, the initial plat, and when this came through with the zoning, was set up for industrial. That's when our client had bought that based on that understanding, and again, they've been in business there for 14 years. So objections twofold. One is the change to the comprehensive plan, which would allow it. Secondly is to having the residential zoning next to industrial. Having said that, if you decide you want to go forward and proceed with this, we do have a few issues that we would like to have addressed as part of the plan. As Mr. Marshall indicated, and if you look at the meeting minutes from the planning department and the planning commission, traffic calming devices were addressed and discussed. As of Friday, we had a couple different plans that were sent to us. Again, there's nothing that's set in stone at this point in terms of what's planned, but I know that there's a couple different proposals where Centurion would go on to Humphrey as to whether this would be a painted section of the roadway or whether it would become a raised curb. Obviously, for the truck traffic going into the industrial property, we would certainly prefer it just be painted and not curb. 53-foot semis do not necessarily get along well with curbs, as you see throughout the city and elsewhere, when different people put rocks and things out trying to prevent them, and of course the rocks and everything end up getting dragged along. So again, we would like to have some certainty if there's going to be traffic calming measures put along in this area, because we've got to be able to protect the truck traffic coming in and out of the industrial area. Also, the other thing that was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting, and again, the applicant alluded to it, you know, currently there's nothing developed here. So Humphrey has parking allowed on each side, but there's nothing there. Nobody parks there. To the extent you would actually end up with apartments next to this industrial area, we would ask that this be a no parking area. Again, the applicant has indicated they plan to master plan it, so all the parking can take place on site. And again, that would be the request. The reason for that, again, as you're getting semis coming in and out on these roadways, they're going to have to swing wide to get in and out. And if people are parked on the street, it just makes it that much more difficult. So again, first and foremost, we would request opposition simply because industrial and residential normally do not go together. Having said that, if you do go forward, we would like some more certainty in terms of what traffic calming measures there may be in this area, and secondly, with regard to parking. And then final item, and Mr. Marshall also mentioned this, we do have a private agreement. It's been filed of record, but items filed of record don't necessarily get remembered in the future without title work done. And we have asked that our private agreement be referenced on the plans going forward. Again, appreciate the applicant saying that, geez, that makes it more difficult. We'd have to come back to the city council if we ever make a change. We respectfully disagree. You have easements on plats all the time. Easements get changed without having to go back through the council. Again, just so it's noted, so that the memories aren't forgotten here when 20 years in the future, if there were to be a change, that private agreement would be remembered as to why we have the 300-foot setbacks the way we do. Any questions?
Any questions?
Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ackley. Are there questions for staff on this? I guess I have a question for David, Planning Department.
David Carey, Director of Planning Department.
Mr. Ackley raised a number of concerns about, I guess, memorializing some of the private agreements. Is that customary and typical, or can that be done, or?
Typically, the private agreements remain private. That is how that was set up originally. That is the expectation normally, is that you would move forward with it in that fashion. So that is kind of how that was addressed in the sense of the review for this project.
I guess going forward, I know there are concerns about trucks and no parking. I mean, how would that be enforced if it's not clear on any of the drawings or documents?
Well, I think that specific question, as far as master planning the apartment area, I think you'd want to ask that to the applicant, to kind of ask the specific question about how that would happen. Typically, the city wouldn't normally, I shouldn't say that. We certainly could have a role on a public street to limit the parking, but at the same time, the commitment that is being talked about here is that it's within that apartment area to master plan it such that the parking can be handled in the best way possible. So I think maybe that is a question that's best asked to the applicant.
Okay. Mr. Marshall, could you address that? Is that something that could be noted on the drawings that you're providing as a footnote or something about the parking, no parking on the street with the truck traffic?
My understanding is that actually LTU would have to agree to that. And I don't know that anything, I've been in part of several developments where we've been asked very similar questions about no parking. I would say that the applicant here would not have any issues about prohibiting parking on the street. And if it was part of the overall PUD, and again, all the departments agreed to it, I think we could add that as part of the notation or subnote that into the PUD document.
I had some questions about the required parking in the PUD. So if, in the apartment building, all the apartments, you're going to try to provide as much parking for residents as possible. I know the Planning Commission occasionally will reduce the amount of parking based on the apartment size and sort of future use, but that doesn't help with visitors necessarily, and visitors might want to park on the roadway. David, Mr. Carey, pardon me, are you suggesting that the city would not put up no parking on Humphrey with the idea that the developer would take care of visitor parking within their area?
No, I don't think I'm saying that the city would not do that. What I'm saying is that I think that I think what Brad just said is that there's an opportunity to have the parking issue addressed mostly on site, and that if there is still some concern at that point, I think that the city would have a role potentially in limiting the parking on some streets if there becomes an issue.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I generally have some similar concerns about residential and industrial. And I guess I'd like to know what, you can't tell me now because you probably haven't done the PUD planning, all the detailed planning, but I guess I'd like to know what kind of assurances you're willing to put in place besides the 300-foot to sort of limit the transparency of that boundary between residential and commercial, industrial.
You asked a very good question here, and the change of zone request before you is the PUD change of zone. What I have here is a current zoning map of what is approved today. And it does show currently R3 to the north and R3 to the south of this property. That is the current zoning as residential and approved today. As we initiated the process, pre-application meetings and so forth, these are particular areas that we work with the city to identify as good fits for residential. One, that they have been previously approved, and as we looked at the entire development with commercial and residential intermixed into the PUD, we felt like we followed the guidance of the planning department and came up with that master plan to pocket those particular residential areas.
Well, thank you.
And one more with the private agreement as it exists today, there are some benefits, I guess, to when you look at this setback requirement for the I-3, that private agreement has particularly, I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit more even, along this corridor with Humphrey, we show basically parking. And we would be able to do anything that's not dwelling. We could do garages, garage units, enclosed there, something. We could do a clubhouse because those don't have any type of dwellings. So we may be able to utilize that area, but to the benefit of that I-3 property, those will be setbacked areas and will help, especially with the parking. So you'll have a parking field as it exists today between the apartment dwellings and the street. So you can never second guess what people are thinking. They want to park on the street and not enter a parking lot. But this would certainly help that you enter the complex, you have a large parking field or something that's not able to be built on, to be developed as buildings, and utilize and protect that space.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any, I guess, Mr. Ackley, were you going to answer a question?
Well, if I may, again, you seem to be asking for clarification. What can we do? How can we do it? Let's get it in the PUD. They keep saying, yeah, we could do it, we might do it. Let's protect a business that you currently have there that's been invested. He's been there 14 years. He's got 15 employees. He pays lots of taxes. Let's get the parking figured out now. It should be pretty easy to put a restriction on there. If they're truly going to have all their parking on site for those apartments, if they come, let's not have them interfere with the industrial that's already there. Similarly, if there's going to be traffic calming devices, which we heard mentioned at Planning Commission, there's been little mention here, but there's nothing showing up on the plans. Where are those going to be and what are those going to be? We want to make sure that they do not interfere with the truck traffic that you have going in and out of this business on a daily basis. Again, let's get it done. Let's not just say, yeah, we could do this, we might do that. Let's get it set. And obviously, we want some restrictions on that so we don't interfere with our business. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on these items? Yes, please come forward.
Do I just say my name, Jan Long?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I know, I'm not sure your name, but he talked about the property tax from the building, but there'll be all the property taxes from all those units, the apartments, so that's good, I think. And I have a similar case. Well, it wasn't, we live up in the Highlands, and right across from Highlands Golf Course, and we bought our lot looking out at the beautiful, golf course and the pond, and I called the Planning Commissioner's office 3 times, 3 different people. I wrote it down. Is there anything planned for that land between the golf course and our house backing to, looking over? No, nothing for 4 years. I mean, nothing for 10 years, I mean. Guess what? 4 years. All those townhouses. And everybody's lived there. I had just buying a lot. All those others had beautiful homes, And they lived there, 15 years. And they've been paying property taxes. And guess what happened to them? So I just don't want to say it happened to me. It can happen to other people, but it happens all the time. We grow. That's what we do. And this is a beautiful city to live in, and people want to be here. And I feel sorry for him, the 15 people working there, and his business, but, that's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to testify on this item? Okay, let's go on.
All right, I'll call items 6J through L. They are approving the Huber Building Redevelopment Agreement relating to the redevelopment of property at 803 Q Street, amending the fiscal year 1920 CIP to authorize and appropriate $550,000 in TIF funds, authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the project for an amount not to exceed $550,000.
Good afternoon, Dan Marvin, Urban Development. Yes, you have 3 items before you. You have the redevelopment agreement, you have the adjustment in the CIP, and then you have the issuance of the developer purchase TIF bond. This project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the downtown master plan, and the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan. It will preserve historic structures, and it meets the desire of a mix of uses, including the residential and first floor commercial. The estimated cost to implement this project is approximately $2.2 million, which includes $576,000 in public financing. At the current assessed valuation of $1,582,300, and estimates of a final valuation of $4.2 million, the project is expected to generate in excess of $576,000 in tax increment financing for this project. What you see before you on the Elmo, that pops up, is what we showed the last time, which is the area that we're working within. And the one thing that I was going to point out is the alley that is in the back here. We talked about it the last time. Thought it was kind of, we're just like, there's the alley. Hold on here. There we go. So the alley's in the back. And what was interesting was the last time we had this up, we were showing the project area. You had somebody come up and talk and said, boy, I really like the idea of being able to use tax increment financing to fix alleys. This alley is not in terrible shape, but the TIF does run for about 15 years. So the proposal is that we can reserve funds, we can prepare for a resurfacing of that alley as we get older or farther into this project. And so I think that's a great use for this. It's great that we preserve an older building that fits within the historic character of Haymarket, and that we're providing residential units and preserving first floor retail. So I think this is a great project. We have Ann Post and Russ Bear here, along with Mike Rogers. He can speak to the tax bond, but I'd be open for any questions that you have.
Yes, Benny.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, Mr. Marvin, just to bring me up to speed again, this is the southeast corner of 9th and Peace.
This would be
8th and Peace Street.
Yes. So we've got
used to be our
we've got Q Street here.
Okay.
And you've got 8th Street here, and the building in question, the Huber building, is right here.
Still a little bit off the monitor.
Okay.
Thank you.
There we go. So here's Q. Here's 8th. The Huber building is right here. It's built in 1905. It was originally designed a farm implement associated building. So it's getting repurposed to something completely different than what it was originally built as.
Thank you. I was a little orientation, and that used to be a theater there, used to be a restaurant, Arturo's to the east of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Mr. Marvin? Seeing none, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item?
Good evening. My name is Ann Post. I'm an attorney with Baylor Evans Law Firm. Address is 1248 O Street, Suite 600. I'm here today on behalf of the redeveloper, BFP LLC, and Mr. Baird of BFP LLC is here with me. So as Director Marvin covered a little in brief, this proposed project is for a redevelopment of the Huber building, which is located at 803 Q Street. It was originally built as a threshing machine company, or for a threshing machine company. And today we are looking at repurposing it. Currently, we have first floor commercial space, and we are renovating the second floor. We're maintaining the first floor commercial space while renovating the second floor for approximately 6 residential condominium units. So these are going to vary in size from just over 500 square feet to just over 2,000 square feet, looking at a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom condominium units. What is exciting is the opportunity to bring owner-occupied housing into the heart of the Haymarket District. It is a chance to bring a more diverse mix of housing to the area. And this location is ideal for housing, both because it brings that mix of commercial and housing, because it is in the heart of the Haymarket with so many amenities next to it, including the arena just a few blocks away, restaurants, retail on the first floor. But more than that, this building is going to have the unique amenity that is a rooftop space. It's going to be, this rooftop space is going to include both a common area for all tenant or all unit owners, but it's also going to include a private space for each unit owner. So when you go up to enjoy your rooftop space, you can enjoy it in as much privacy as you'd like to, and as you can achieve on the rooftop space. So our redeveloper is taking great care to design this in a way that's going to provide this attractive amenity, but also not detract from the historic significance of the building. So as stated, this agreement, this redevelopment is going to include over $550,000, exactly $550,000 in tax increment financing. This project includes close to $1 million in TIF eligible expenses, and $550,000 of those, and there is only $550,000 of TIF involved in this project. Those expenses include fixing the brick facade, repointing or tuck pointing the bricks, which is necessary to keep the building watertight. Also installation of new windows, and for site acquisition. And so Normally, when I have one of these projects in front of you, I start with a picture, the elevation of what it would look like, so I can show you the wonderful impact it's going to have on Lincoln skyline. This time I'm going to end with it to try and, if I can, let's see.
It's down here.
Thank you. This time I'm going to end with it to emphasize really the benefit that this project is bringing to Lincoln. What it's bringing is it's maintaining that mixed use, it's maintaining the commercial space, adding the mixed use with residential, including owner-occupied residential, to bring 24/7 activity and energy to the area. It includes the unique rooftop amenity, which will only add to the energy of the Haymarket. But also, if you notice from this elevation, it preserves the historic character of the Haymarket. On this elevation, unlike many that I show you with redevelopment agreements, I feel it's almost more necessary to actually point out what the changes are. As you can see here, this depicts the common area of the rooftop, and here along this edge of the building, we've got those private rooftop areas. And then as you can see, there's also the windows that are new windows, and then there's going to be great care taken on the repointing and tuck pointing of the building to ensure that it doesn't change that exterior facade. So with that, I will end my testimony, and I know we have our redeveloper here to answer any questions and to talk to you a little bit about the historic significance of the building and his history with the building and the efforts they've gone to maintain the historic character of the building.
Thanks, Ann. My name is Russ Baer, 633 South 112th Street in Lincoln, Nebraska. Actually about a mile and a half outside of Lincoln, but good enough for our purposes. I want you to know that when my wife and I, Gwen, had the opportunity to acquire this building in 1998. We did it with our eyes wide open, understanding what the Haymarket was like in 1998 and gambling a little bit, but always in the back of our mind was the fact that we were stewards of a building in a historic part of our community. And those aren't just words, and Ed Zimmer can obviously do a much better job than I can telling you the history of the building. In fact, he could probably do a better job of telling you the history of the building while we've been there, because he knows his stuff. But as we acquired the building in '98, the intent was to bring retail into the community, into the downtown area or the historic area. It was to bring a restaurant back that had been pushed out of the downtown area 15 or so years before that, and it was to put a dinner theater on the top floor. And our love for and passion for theater goes back to when I was in high school and passed through all of our children. And the most difficult part of the project, I'm actually going to use that if I can. You brought it, I might as well use it. It's very pretty. Our children have all been through this, and one of the most difficult portions of this is actually having the theater move on. And Ms. Ward, you brought it up last time, and I want to address that again a little bit this time. But let me give you a little history. Ann already mentioned the Thresher in the early 1900s, and frankly was farm-related until the farm crisis of the 80s, which we're all familiar with. When the previous owner to us acquired the building sometime in the 80s, and when we acquired it, it was basically a storage area. There was a black and white, as was the name of it, film developing, and Shoes Restaurant. For those of you that have some history here, you remember Jerry Shoecraft was a basketball player, and he had actually a beer garden in the front where the restaurant is today, and a bar in the back. And the Haymarket was just developing, frankly. I mean, from the late 80s. Our first thought was, how do we bring other things into the building and bring that mixed use into the space? We negotiated and worked with Arturos, who in the early 80s was moved out because of a potential hotel that was now where the Embassy Suites is at, but was moved out, and for 10 years there was nothing there but a parking lot. When the Arturos got together with us, they were thrilled to come back home, as they called it, from the Taco Hut to now Arturos. After 5 years, some change of ownership internally and those types of things, they decided it was time to move on. And we have attempted to continue to have a restaurant in that space. Today, a little shout out to Screamers. It's a wonderful singing establishment by a gentleman who, Kevin, and his partner in the early 90s were involved heavily with or Kevin was, with the Scarlet and Cream Singers. Boy, I will not say that again. But a great place, and again, to our commitment to the Haymarket and bringing something local back to our community. We originally had Shepherd's Business Interior on the whole main floor. We experimented with a place called Centerville Market after Shepherd's lease went out. Centerville was a great idea 8 years before its time, because there was no rooftops down here. There was no residents down here. But it was basically an indoor street vendor market. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was really great, but if you have no one living here, no one's really shopping there. We were fortunate enough then to bring From Nebraska. So I hope you're understanding a theme we've got going on here. And it's all about what we can do to bring Nebraska back to our roots and the Lincoln area. The From Nebraska gift shop was very successful. Licorice International, a homegrown business. Their leases came up. Their leases were renewed. Both of those tenants were with us for 10 to 15 years. From Nebraska changed ownership. They're going to remain with us. Thank you to the Ballards for their commitment. And by the way, the Ballards have James Arthur Vineyard, another local Nebraska company that's serving their wine out of this location. Licorice International is moving to another space at their decision, not ours, and that allowed James Arthur Vineyard to expand to their space, and Licorice International, and From Nebraska to expand their space. Okay, so I've worked all around it. Now we're back to the theater. We started the theater. It was I apologize if my time is going just.
One more minute.
Okay, well then I'll talk very fast. Okay, so the Haymarket Theater was originally the Star City Dinner Theater. You can see the sign over here. That was designed with the historic preservation folks in mind to be that old type of look. The theater ran its course, the dinner theater ran its course over a 3 or 4 year period, wasn't successful. Brought in some local talented individuals to keep the theater portion going. They've done a wonderful job. It was an expensive space for them to manage, and I don't mean from a rent perspective. I'm talking about the utilities associated with 10,000 square feet, the property taxes associated with 10,000, all of the other things that are associated with running an operation. Our departure, our separation was very amicable. 5 years ago when we renewed them, I told them that we would probably be doing a 13-month termination of lease notice. We wrote it into that. November 1st of 2018, I gave them that notice, and they actually asked to come out early. Our relationship remains strong. They still have some property in the building that we're asking them to move out gently, and our son-in-law, Jason, is on their board. And so I want you to understand that our relationship with the theater was amicable, remains amicable, and we're frankly saddened about the move, but it was the right move for them and the right move for us at the time. There's a lot of things that we've done to the building. I won't go through them right now, but I will tell you that everything that we do going forward with this project will be to maintain the building so it's here for generations to come. As a steward, you're only a steward for a short period of time of history. There are things that have to happen to that building. But for this TIF financing, there are things that we could not do, and including the repointing and those types of items. And I'll be remiss, but I want to end with thanking the Urban Development Department. Dan and Hallie and Abby and Dallas, they've been very professional to work with, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions?
No questions, but thank you very much for a nice presentation. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on this item?
Good evening. My name is Richard Halverson, and for you new members, I've testified as TIF a few times before, and it's definitely a losing battle. In this case, though, I'm not against the project itself. It seems like the only public good that's been enunciated is that this alley that might be fixed sometime in the future. Doing that exterior work, well, that's going to benefit the building. It's not going to benefit the public. Again, nobody's laid out specifically laid out what the public gets out of this, other than an alley that sometime in the future might be improved upon. And plus, the attorney mentioned, or I believe, part of the funds will be used for site acquisition. Well, they already said they own the building, so what do they need money for site acquisition? That's all I got.
Thank you very much for testifying. Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this item? Seeing none, we can move on.
All right, that concludes our public hearing. We can move on to our ordinance's third reading. Item 7A, Text Amendment 19006, application of Christian retirement homes to amend various sections of the code. This is mainly to allow both on and off sale of alcohol as a permitted accessory use to the healthcare facility, residential, and elderly and retirement housing, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Washington, seconded by Christensen. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 7B is a street name change. Application of Russell and Renee Anderson to rename South 85th Street to Fireside Place, introduced by Washington.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Washington, seconded by McGinnis. Any discussion on this item?
Madam Chair, I would like to have Mr. Carey come up and answer a couple questions for me, please.
Okay.
Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely.
David Carey, Director of the Planning Department.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. I'm referring back to some discussion we had last week when we had a public hearing. The road itself doesn't line up with the northern portion of 84th Street. And we talked about a road today that North 27th and don't line up. How do we keep getting all these roads that just kind of start in the middle of the place and don't, how do we get those put in place in the first place? How do we stop that?
Sure, it's a fair question. It certainly would be a better situation if every single road could line up perfectly. Some of those quote-unquote mile line roads out in the county, if you think about the southern area where we have 56th Street and then there's a jog of 2 blocks over to 54th Street, that was part of the original platting of the area, and there actually were, my understanding is there were actually 2 different counties originally, and then there was a merge to Lancaster County, and so there literally was a different setup of the mile line streets originally, way back in the 1800s. So there's some of those situations out there. 27th Street, I believe, is part of that, except I think that was one that was dealing with a physical barrier, as was mentioned earlier. Sometimes that has happened in the past, too. For more local streets, which is the one we're dealing with here with the proposed street name change, further to the north, 85th Street has already been platted and it's been named as such. So generally speaking, on those local streets, we often have more curvilinear streets where they have some curvature to them. But we still follow the consistent naming unless there is a significant shift in that alignment. So we historically and consistently have been naming those streets, continuing whether it's an east-west street and then with a letter or a name, or the north-south street with a number. So in this case, we certainly still believe that 85th Street can continue to be 85th Street in the stretch that we're talking about today.
You mentioned just now the curvilinear connection. You anticipate that happening sometime in the far future?
No, I don't think it'll be in the far future. I think the intervening piece of property will definitely develop at some point, similar to what has happened to the north and what is happening to the south of it. We don't certainly have that plan sitting in front of us today, but in our planning sense, we definitely feel like there will be an intervening street there that will make the connection, and with that street should also be 85th Street.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before we lose Mr. Carey, so since our hearing last week, too, this has given me some pause as a new council person. Just to reiterate, this is the same in the code, whether it's public or private.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you. And so I also live on a private cul-de-sac, and the address, and I mentioned this last week, makes no sense to me. So I just want for my colleagues to know, for public safety purposes, and I don't want to set a precedence. I know you've dealt with that in the past, that I can't support this change. So for those reasons. So thank you for clarifying that information. And based on our discussions last week as well. So this is difficult, and I can appreciate why people would, it's a great name, it's cozy, it makes sense geographically, and I don't begrudge Mr. Anderson, I believe, for wanting the change whatsoever. But it does concern me from public safety point of view as well as setting a precedence. So for those reasons, I will not be supporting the change. So thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this item? Any other questions for staff? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
No.
McGinnis?
No.
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
No.
Washington?
No.
I did
Bowers?
not mean to say yes.
Bowers?
No.
Motion carried.
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry. I said yes, I meant to vote no.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, so motion lost 0-7.
Motion lost, say it again, Teresa?
0-7.
0-7, okay.
All right, next is item 7C, approving the transfer of unspent and unencumbered appropriations from the 14th Warlick Old Cheney Road CIP project to the Transportation and Utilities Street Improvement Fund and postponing appropriations within the CIP for this project to the 2024-2025 fiscal year, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Introduced by Ward, seconded by Christensen. Any discussion, comments before we vote?
I would like to make a comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, please do.
I think it's known to most people that I served as a city county planning commissioner, and I also have training in planning as a regional planner, and it is really hard for me to turn away from 19 years of public discourse, planning, and engineering studies and suggest that we can make a new decision at a late date on a project. I will not be able to support the delay of this project. I will be voting to move this project forward.
Any other comments? Benny?
See if I can do this right this time instead of the yes/no thing. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to thank Councilman McGinnis, this guy, for bringing this forward and giving us a chance to talk about this again. As Councilwoman Washington said, we have been studying this and talking about this for a number of years, a couple of decades. We've had lots of public hearings. We've had lots of community input. We've had 8 plans, whittled down to 3 plans, whittled down to 1 plan, and we've talked about this a lot. But having an additional public hearing and additional conversation doesn't hurt. We should always be open to talking about things civilly, respectfully, and openly. I feel we've done that. I look forward to this project going out to bid and seeing where we go from there. I will not be supporting a delay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Reiterate my thanks also to our colleague, Councilman McGinnis, for the opportunity, especially for new council people. I think it's been a really important process. I know it has for me to go through this, and I've spent, we all have, a great deal of time sifting through many, many emails that I know we're all grateful for, and spent the time this weekend as they kept coming in.
Yes, they did.
They did, and that's important, and I'm a big believer in the public process, especially coming in new as an elected official to this process. So it's given me a lot of time to learn and think. It's been difficult because we've heard from people that are professionals, non-professionals, friends, people we respect on both sides of this issue, and it's been a process. So again, thank you to Councilman McGinnis for that. I have to say, I've come to the decision that I too will be voting to move this forward, not supporting the ordinance. It's a public safety issue. I get reminded of that a lot. And I also, it's hard for me to walk away from the money that we've invested already as a city and the processes that we've been through way before my time. So I respect that as a longtime government employee. I know that the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that. So for those reasons, and we do have the quarter-cent process moving forward, and we have some other funding. I was never quite convinced that 19 million would be used on streets that we hoped it might be. So thanks again for this process. I think it's been important, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Any other comments?
This was a tough decision for me. I come from Northeast Lincoln, and I have some very serious concerns about the structure of our roads in Northeast Lincoln. I worry about how those roads are maintained, and I worry about the upkeep of those roads. I will be voting with Councilman McGinnis on this, because I do have some serious concerns about making sure that all roads in Lincoln, including Northeast Lincoln, are maintained and kept safe and kept sound.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Sure.
Richard?
First off, I want to thank the staff and everybody that helped answer a lot of questions for me, from Director Cassidy to Thomas Schaefer, and mostly Lonnie Berglund was very helpful and very professional in answering a lot of questions. And the mayor, Larry and Gaylor Baird, and her staff was very good and open and easy to work with. And so was my council members. It was a lot of fun working with you, I think, so far on this. We haven't voted yet, but I'll tell you later. But but mostly I want to thank the hundreds of people that took time and effort to email us, call us, and even, God forbid, even write some personal letters on this. This was really outstanding that our community was involved in this, and it's been quite an experience, and a lot of people had a lot of passion on this. And I understand that because it's your roadways, it's your streets, and it affects you personally. So that brings out a lot of passion in a lot of people as they come along. But I still believe we should listen to the citizens, and I believe that most of the citizens in this town would like to see a delay on this and to be able to move that money into the streets that we have now. We've got $26 million a year that our Citizens Transportation Group said we needed. We're coming up with $7 to $9 million with our quarter cent, which is really not enough to stay ahead of taking care of our existing streets. So I propose this, first off, to be able to use those funds now and get some of our streets done and move this roundabout situation to a later date. And a lot of it also because of the state, and the state doing their South Beltway. And the timing of closing South Lincoln to the Beltway to Highway 77, access off of Saltillo, and closing 14th and Old Cheney at the same time, is going to cause a lot of problems. I know it will. I know it's going to be hard for a lot of people in South Lincoln to get out, but if we go forward, that's what they'll have to live with at this point. It's a long time coming. I remember, and I'm going to go back a little bit, I remember the 1960s when we used to take the highway out, which is 14th Street, and go all the way out in the country to Skyline Dairy, which is out there right now is IBEW headquarters, and that was a dairy, and we would go out there and get ice cream, and going underneath the Rock Island Bridge and going out that way. And it's been a long time coming. I mean, the South Industrial Park was built in the 60s, and it still has vacancies there. So that area is still growing and still developing at this point. And some of the numbers that were brought forward on the streets and on the traffic counts, they seem to change over the years at some point. Mayor Beitler came out at one time saying we're going to be over 65,000 cars on that interchange. But then he said in his press release that if we do a South Beltway, we'll only have a 40% increase over the 40 that are there, which would be at 56,000 cars. And a lot of the studies were done with Denton Road to be a full commercial build-out. It still may be, but at this point, it doesn't seem. We have a large racetrack down there and housing, and I'm not seeing a large commercial build-out. So the actual numbers for the corner of 14th and Warlick, I'm not saying we'll not reach 60,000 by the year 2040, but it's going to be I have a funny feeling it's going to be a lot less than the 60,000 cars. I can't remember 60,000 car intersection that we have in town currently. The other part about this was the $36,450,000 cost, which is quite a lot of money for one interchange. And it also includes $1 million for LES to spend on relocating utilities, $1 million for Windstream to spend on relocating utilities. These are all added to the $36 million. It's a large cost for one intersection, but early on, the staff and the past administration was asking for an iconic design. And I believe they got an iconic design. I just think we have a lot of iconic potholes that we'll see that need to be fixed coming up. The other questions I still have with this, and I'm sure they'll be addressed at some point, is the operation and maintenance of a curved, elevated roundabout that will be above ground. I know it's not all going to be a bridge, but some of it will be a bridge. And bridges and ice and snow in Lincoln, Nebraska don't go over real good, especially if it's a curved bridge. Even Director Cassidy put out a tweet that said they had 8 accidents on the bridges here just a while back, and be real careful. That all being said, this is a project that's been in the works, and I really, really enjoyed having all the talk that we had and that we shared it, and everybody had a chance to say something, and a lot of our constituents and ratepayers and taxpayers did share that. So I think that, for me, I think a delay is what we need. So when we get the South Bypass done, we'll know how many cars we need to design for. If we need to change the design, we can at that point. But in the meantime, I think a delay until we get a lot of that done for at least 3 years would be prudent.
Thank you. Roy, do you have any comments? Well, I do. I do want to thank all the people that testified, sent us lots of emails and phone calls. I do appreciate the open dialogue that we've had. I think that is absolutely beneficial to any municipality, but I have to tell you, I am opposed and will vote no for this delay on this project for a number of reasons. You know, Lincoln has a well-deserved reputation of being one of the best-run cities in the nation. In fact, MSN Money rated us 4th in the nation of cities of our size. You know, you don't earn this recognition without thoughtful and deliberate planning and execution based on research and facts, along with the financial integrity of reinvestment in our infrastructure. You know, good governance is making these really, really tough decisions, but most importantly, keep our city moving forward. You know, there are a number of facts that have really been misrepresented in the dialogue that we've had. The cost of this project is just not one roundabout, but the reconstruction of 7 intersections, 3 bridges, 7 miles of street, 3 pedestrian undercrossing, and new pedestrian connections. The studies indicate that the cost-benefit ratio is 6-to-1, which is pretty good, which factors in motorist fuel and time saving, and most importantly, improved safety for all modes of transportation. We heard testimony from many individuals that spoke about accidents in this area, and it was amazing. I spoke to an architect 2 weeks ago whose daughter goes to Southwest High School, and she wasn't involved in the accident, but she was right there and saw the accident happen. She jumped out, this brave young girl jumped out and aided the victims who were injured in the crash and stayed with them, and that was at 14th and Warlick Road. A number of folks in the emails and testimony have encouraged us to wait until after the South Beltway is built and then reassess what's going on with the needs in the southwest part of the city. The southwest part of the city is growing with or without a beltway. There have been years of study and research showing that these intersections will see an increase in traffic with or without the South Beltway under construction, going currently from 38,000 vehicles per day, making it one of the busiest intersections in Lincoln. And the traffic engineers determined backups at peak times stretching over a half of a mile. And they predict going to 59,000 vehicles per day in 2045. The truth is that we are a growing and thriving community, and that means we need to plan for this and put our resources toward this growth like we always have done. Folks have said that both projects going on, it'll create traffic congestion and that Highway 77 closures will add to the problem. Well, the truth is that Highway 77 is going to stay open throughout both projects, the South Beltway and this project. And this is what the Nebraska Department of Transportation is saying. This project will be phased to avoid closures of Highway 77 and Nebraska Highway. Traffic will be maintained with at least one lane open in each direction. In addition, during construction, adjacent north and south county roadway corridors will not be closed at the same time, meaning that when 54th Street is closed, they will be detouring on the adjacent 38th and 68th because they'll be maintained to handle the detour routes. Any construction project we know brings delays, but we just completed Northwest 48th Street, and Northwest 48th Street maintained access. Interstate 80 did not shut down. It maintained access. We know how to work through these difficult construction. That's what's amazing, and that's what has allowed us to continue to grow our city. But it's also important to emphasize that we have had past public input with the multiple studies that were done in 2000, 2004, 2012, that have all stated that there are significant issues in this area. The design competition that was done in 2014 selected the most efficient design that took less private property and actually came in as the most cost efficient and effective. This project has been part of public meetings and has been included in our CIP for a number of years. In addition, it has been even approved by several members of the current City Council. I just want to share with you just a couple of comments from people in the Southwest who have lived with this area of intersections, and this is what they said. Please deny the 14th and Old Cheney Road project delays. We have lived in this area for 30 years, and the traffic congestion gets worse every day. This money has been approved for this area, so please don't let it be taken away. We have 3 schools in this area with many students driving, walking, and biking through this dangerous intersection and intersections. The people in the north part of town have no clue what we are going through every day. Please don't let them take away our already approved funds. Another person said, I'm writing to express my deep dissatisfaction at your considering delaying the necessary changes to 14th and Old Cheney intersection project. This intersection, group of intersections, is a mess and a safety hazard. As one who lives in that area and forced to drive through it multiple times a day, I know what gridlock it can be at times, and it's not just during rush hours. It will only get worse with the increase in construction in the south area. Please don't delay this. I voted for the increase in sales tax so other street issues can be addressed, and I feel that your bait and switch tactics on this Old Cheney project are a stab in my back. I fear if not addressed now, the costs will only go up more and will never get done. So for this and so many of all the other constituents that have stated their real concerns with delaying this project, I am going to vote no to a delay. I want to move the city project forward. It impacts all of us. If we make improvements to the Southwest, it's making improvements to all of our cities. So I appreciate the great discussion. I think openness and transparency and dialogue are critical, but I will vote no. Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
No.
Ward?
No.
Washington?
No.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion lost 3-4.
Okay.
Next, our resolution for action only is item 8A, hearing on the 2021 and 6-year Streets and Highways Program, introduced by Ward.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 9A through E. Our ordinances on first reading are items 10A through H. Our pending list are items 12A and B.
Madam Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind our city that Saturday, November 9th at 2 p.m., there will be a Veterans Parade. They can find more about it at LincolnVeteransParade.org. It'll begin at Lincoln High and go down past the north steps of the Capitol Building. With that, I'd like to say,
Go ahead.
remember the golden rule.
Remember the golden rule. Madam Chair, I'd like to take a moment, if I may, to say happy birthday to my father, Benny Shope Sr. in Kentucky, who's 83 years old today. Happy birthday, Daddy.
I'll second that.
So moved.
All right.
Push my light.
We are all moved, so.
I move adjournment.
Wonderful. Second. Please call the roll.
Christensen?
Yes.
McGinnis?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Washington?
Yes.
Bowers?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.